Three prophecies many believe are ending this month. Reason 1. The feast that no one knows. Jesus said in Matthew 24:36, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." For centuries, people have taken this to mean, don't even try to figure it out. Stop watching. Stop paying attention. But now, many believe that's not what Jesus meant at all. They believe his words were not random. They were not vague. They were pointing straight to something his Jewish audience would have instantly recognized. Could we have misunderstood Jesus' warning while prophecy was shouting the truth all along? And once you understand this, the September 23rd prophecy starts to make sense. Was he describing a feast? A specific feast, the Feast of Trumpets. Why was it called the feast? No one knows the day or the hour. Here's a fascinating fact. The Feast of Trumpets is the only Jewish feast that begins on the new moon. And in ancient times, you couldn't just pull out your phone, open an app, and say, "Oh, the new moon is at 7:42 p.m." No, back then, the start of the feast wasn't predicted. It had to be witnessed. Two men would stand, watching the dark sky for the first thin sliver of the moon to appear. If clouds blocked the sky, the sighting could be delayed. That meant you didn't know if the feast would begin on the first expected day or the second. That's why the Feast of Trumpets became known as the feast no one knows the day or the hour. And now, suddenly, Jesus' words take on a whole new meaning. What if Jesus' most mysterious phrase was actually his clearest warning? We're just beginning to see how deep this prophetic signal goes. The Feast of Trumpets is also tied to the blowing of trumpets. Over 100 blasts in a single day, culminating in the last trumpet. And what did Paul say in 1 Corinthians 15:52? "In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed." Do you see it? The rapture imagery isn't hidden. It's staring us in the face. The trumpet blast, the last trumpet, the feast no one knows the day or the hour. This isn't symbolic anymore. This is specific, and it's soon. Is this the moment prophecy stops hinting and starts shouting? Stick around. What's coming next makes it even clearer. We haven't even hit the deepest part of this mystery yet. And here's where things get intense. In 2025, the Feast of Trumpets falls on September 23rd through the 24th. That's the exact same feast many scholars believe will launch Daniel's 70th week. Could one ancient feast hold the exact date of the rapture? Now, let me ask you a chilling question. If the rapture were to happen during this feast, would you be ready? Or would you be asleep when the trumpet sounded? What if the end arrives while you're distracted, unprepared, or unaware? Because here's the progression. The trumpet blasts were meant to wake the people from spiritual sleep. They were a call to repentance and holiness, and they reminded Israel that judgment was coming soon. Fun fact, in Jewish tradition, the Feast of Trumpets is also seen as a rehearsal for the final judgment. That's why it's called Yom Teruah, the day of shouting or the day of blasting. So what happens when you line up this feast? The idiom, "no one knows the day or the hour," the imagery of the trumpet blast, and the exact dates of September 23rd to 24th, 2025, all at the same time? It's almost as if prophecy is whispering, "Pay attention. Don't miss this." And yet, the Feast of Trumpets is only the beginning. Because the next revelation will shock even the most seasoned prophecy watcher. Reason 2. The mystery of 6,000 years. For centuries, Believers have whispered about a mystery, an ancient timeline woven into creation itself. And what if that timeline ends now? If this timeline is right, we are moments from midnight. It's the belief that human history follows the same pattern God set in the very beginning. And if this mystery is true, then the world may already be standing at the edge of its final moments. Did God hide humanity's end date inside creation's beginning? Let's go back to the very first week. Genesis tells us God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. On the seventh day, He rested. Simple enough, right? But then we read 2 Peter 3:8, and Peter gives us a key. With the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The early church fathers took this seriously. Ancient rabbis did too. They believed the creation week was more than history. It was prophecy. 6 days of work symbolized 6,000 years of mankind's rule on earth. The seventh day of rest symbolized a 7th millennium, 1,000 years of peace, when Christ Himself would reign. Now here's where it gets intense. If Adam's creation marks the beginning of day 1, then Jewish genealogies and biblical chronologies add up to about 4,000 years from Adam to Jesus. Scholars have wrestled with the numbers, but most agree it's about 4,000 years. Then from Jesus' time until today, nearly 2,000 years more have passed. Do the math. 4,000 plus 2,000 equals 6,000 years. 6 days are complete. 6 millennia have passed, which means, if this pattern is true, humanity is standing at the sunset of the 6th day. And if the sun is setting on the 6th day, then the dawn of the 7th is coming fast. But what is the 7th day? The Bible calls it the millennial reign of Christ. Revelation 20 describes it: 1,000 years where Satan is bound, judgment is given, and Jesus reigns as king over the nations. So let's pause for a moment. Could it really be this exact? Is the entire span of human history a giant prophetic week? Here's a mind-blowing fun fact. The Jewish Talmud itself, written by rabbis long before our time, teaches that the world will last 6,000 years before entering a 7,000-year day of rest. Early church writers like Irenaeus and Barnabas taught the same thing. They believed creation itself was a prophetic clock. And if that's the case, then right now, in our time, the clock is ticking to 0. Imagine humanity has been running a 6,000-year marathon, and now we're hearing the roar of the crowd at the finish line. The finish line isn't centuries away, it's right in front of us. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Many scholars believe we're not just close to the 6,000-year mark, we're already inside the final stretch. Some estimates place the current year at around 5,993 years since creation. That means only 7 short years remain until we reach 6,000. What happens when we cross that threshold? Will the 7th millennium begin with Christ's reign? Or will it begin with the darkest 7 years of tribulation the world has ever seen, leading into His return? Many note 6 days of labor, then rest. 6,000 years of humanity striving, sinning, rebelling. Then 1,000 years of peace. 6 days of creation, then 1 holy Sabbath. 6 millennia of man's kingdoms, then 1 millennium of God's kingdom. It's the same story, written in nature, history, and prophecy. Has God been writing the same countdown through every part of creation? And the stakes couldn't be higher. If we are at the end of the 6,000-year cycle, then what's about to unfold isn't just another chapter of history. It's the end of history as we know it. You're not just living through prophecy. you might be fulfilling it. What if we're the final generation and don't even know it yet? So, let's put it bluntly. If the 6,000-year mystery is real, then we are not waiting for centuries. We're not even waiting for decades. We are the generation alive at the turn of the age. And what does that mean for you? It means the decisions you make now matter more than ever. It means repentance isn't something you can push off until tomorrow. It means telling your friends, your family, your children isn't optional. Because the day is closing. The night is almost here. And when the trumpet sounds, it will be too late to prepare. So, now, people say, 6 days are over. The 7th is coming. The only question is, are you ready for it? Reason 3. The final jubilee. The Dead Sea Scroll Calendar predicted this moment 2,000 years ago. Over 68 years ago, ancient texts were found. What do they have to tell us about our prophetic timeline? Picture this. It's 1947. A young Bedouin shepherd named Mohammed Ed-Dib is searching for his lost goat in the rocky cliffs of Qumran, near the Dead Sea. The landscape is harsh, unforgiving, the kind of place where secrets can stay buried for millennia. He spots a cave opening high up in the cliff face. Thinking his goat might have wandered inside, he throws a stone into the darkness and hears something that stops him cold. Not the bleat of a goat, but the distinctive crack of pottery breaking. What happens next will send shockwaves through the archaeological and biblical world. Inside that cave, Muhammad finds large clay jars, each one carefully sealed. And inside those jars, scrolls, ancient manuscripts wrapped in linen, preserved by the dry desert air for nearly 2,000 years. He has no idea what he's found, but he knows it's old. Really old. Word spreads. More caves are discovered. More scrolls are found. When scholars finally get their hands on these manuscripts, they realize they're looking at the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. Maybe the greatest ever. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing about the timing. These scrolls are discovered in 1947, just 1 year before Israel becomes a nation again in 1948. After nearly 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people are about to return to their homeland. And right before it happens, the desert gives up its secrets. Coincidence? I don't think so. The Essenes, that's who hid these scrolls. But they weren't just any Jewish sect. They were a community of prophetic watchmen living in the wilderness, completely convinced that they were living in the final chapter of human history. These weren't armchair theologians or casual Bible students. They were radical believers who had separated themselves from mainstream Judaism because they believed the end of the age was at hand. They lived in caves. They practiced strict discipline. They studied prophecy day and night. And they believed that God had given them a special revelation, a unique calendar system that would reveal the exact timing of the Messiah's coming and the end of the world. Think about that for a moment. While the rest of the Jewish world was going about their daily lives, the Essenes were essentially running a prophetic think tank in the desert. They were watching. They were calculating. They were waiting. And here's the part that should absolutely give you chills. They hid these scrolls in 68 AD, just 2 years before the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and scattered the Jewish people across the earth. It's almost like they had supernatural insight into what was coming. Like they knew their time was up, their community was about to be wiped out, but they had something absolutely critical to preserve for future generations. For us. They carefully wrapped their most precious manuscripts, including their prophetic calendar and their calculations about the Messiah's coming, and sealed them in jars. Then they hid them in caves, trusting that somehow, some way, God would make sure the right people found them at exactly the right time. And that's exactly what happened. In 1947, on the very eve of Israel's rebirth, these ancient warnings surfaced. These prophetic calculations emerged from their 2,000-year hiding place just as the final countdown was beginning. This calendar doesn't just record time, it predicts destiny. But what were the Essenes actually predicting? What did they see coming that was so important they risked everything to preserve it? And why does their ancient calendar seem to point directly to the year we're living in right now? That's what you're about to discover, and it's going to change everything you thought you knew about biblical prophecy. Discovery 2. A different calendar. The Essene prophetic clock. Now, here's where things get absolutely fascinating. When most people think of ancient calendars, they assume they're all basically the same, just different ways of counting days and months. But what the scholars found in those Qumran caves wasn't just another calendar. It was something revolutionary, something that would completely change how we understand prophetic timing. The traditional Jewish calendar that most people know follows lunar months. It's based on the cycles of the moon, with 354 days in a year. It's the calendar that determines when Passover falls, when Yom Kippur occurs, when the feasts happen. It's ancient, it's biblical, and it's been used for thousands of years. But the Essenes? They completely rejected this system. Instead, they followed a solar calendar, 364 days divided into perfect weeks, with every year ending on the same day of the week. But here's what makes this absolutely mind-blowing. This wasn't just their way of keeping track of appointments and holy days. This was their prophetic clock for understanding the entire timeline of human history. You see, the Essenes believed that God had encoded the secret of prophetic timing into the very structure of their calendar. They called it the Calendar of Light because they believed it revealed God's plan hidden since the foundation of the world. At the heart of this system were what they called Shemitah cycles, 7-year periods. Now, this concept comes straight from the Bible. In Leviticus 25:3-4, God commanded, 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. But here's where the Essenes took it to another level entirely. They grouped 7 of these Shemitah cycles together to create something called a jubilee, a 50-year period. And according to Leviticus 25:10, "And you shall consecrate the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family." Now, mainstream Judaism understood these as agricultural and economic cycles, but the Essenes? They saw something far more profound. They believed these Jubilee cycles were God's way of structuring all of human history into prophetic periods. Think about it. Every 50 years, a major reset. Every 50 years, a time of release and restoration. Every 50 years, a divine intervention in human affairs. And certain Jubilees, specific ones, would mark the most earth-shattering events in history, including both the first arrival of the Messiah and his return. But they didn't stop there. The Essenes developed what biblical scholars now call the 4 Ages timeline. They divided all of human history into 4 distinct prophetic epochs. The Age of Chaos, from Adam to Abraham. 2,000 years of humanity learning the hard way that life without God leads to destruction. Think Cain and Abel. Think the flood. Think the Tower of Babel. Chaos and rebellion against God's order. The age of Torah, from Abraham to Jesus. 2,000 years of God establishing His law, His covenant, His chosen people. This is the age of Moses, of David, of the prophets. The age where God revealed His standards and showed humanity that even with the law, we couldn't save ourselves. The age of grace, from Jesus to His second coming. 2,000 years of the gospel going to all nations. This is the church age, the age we're living in right now. The age where salvation is offered freely to anyone who believes. The age of the kingdom. The final 1,000 years when Christ rules the earth in perfect peace and righteousness. Now, here's what's absolutely staggering about this timeline. The Essenes believed that each age was exactly 2,000 years long. 3 ages of 2,000 years each, followed by a final 1,000-year Sabbath rest. A total of 7,000 years of human history, perfectly mirroring the 7 days of creation. And they believed that the transitions between these ages, especially the transition from the age of grace to the age of the kingdom, would be marked by specific jubilee cycles that you could calculate in advance. But here's the part that's going to absolutely blow your mind. According to their calculations, we're not just living somewhere in the middle of the age of grace. We're living at the very end of it. In fact, according to some interpretations of the Essene calendar, 2025 represents the final year before the last jubilee cycle of human history begins. The transition year, the threshold moment, the end of one age, and the beginning of the final countdown to Christ's return. You're about to see how this connects to what's happening right now in 2025, and it's going to blow your mind. Because if the Essenes were right about the structure of history, if they were right about jubilee cycles marking major prophetic events, then what we're witnessing in our world today isn't random chaos. It's the final setup, the last-minute preparation for the most significant event in human history since the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Discovery 3. The Jubilee that welcomed the Messiah. Now we come to the moment that changes everything. The moment that proves the Essenes weren't just religious dreamers living in caves. They were prophetic mathematicians who had cracked God's code for the timing of the Messiah's arrival. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls is a fragmentary text that archaeologists labeled 11Q Melchizedek. It's written in Hebrew and Aramaic, dated to approximately 100 years before Christ was born. And what this ancient document reveals will absolutely stagger you. The scroll describes a mysterious figure called the Anointed One, the Messiah, who would arrive during a specific Jubilee year. But this isn't some vague, someday in the future prophecy. This is precise prophetic mathematics. According to 11Q Melchizedek, this Messiah would come to accomplish very specific things: to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, to comfort all who mourn. Now, if those words sound familiar, they should, because they're lifted directly from Isaiah 61:1 through 2. But here's what makes this absolutely mind-blowing. The Essenes connected these messianic promises specifically to the Jubilee system. They believed the Messiah would arrive during a Jubilee year to inaugurate the ultimate liberation, not just of Israel, but of all humanity. They were watching. They were calculating. They were waiting for the exact Jubilee when prophecy would be fulfilled. And then it happened. Fast forward about 100 years from when 11Q Melchizedek was written. A carpenter's son from Nazareth begins his public ministry. His name is Jesus, and the very first recorded act of his ministry is walking into the synagogue in his hometown and asking for the scroll of Isaiah. Picture the scene. It's a Sabbath day. The synagogue is packed. Jesus, who's been growing up in this community for 30 years, stands up to read. They hand him the scroll of Isaiah, and he deliberately unrolls it to chapter 61. Then, in front of everyone who's known him since he was a child, he reads these exact words. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." The synagogue goes dead silent. Every eye is fixed on him. And then Jesus does something that sends shockwaves through that room and through history itself. He rolls up the scroll, hands it back to the attendant, sits down, and says, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Do you understand what just happened? Jesus wasn't just claiming to be a prophet. He wasn't just claiming to be a teacher. He was announcing that he was the anointed one, the Messiah, that the Essenes had been calculating and waiting for. And he was declaring that this was the exact jubilee year the ancient scrolls had predicted. But here's the part that will absolutely blow your mind. When Jesus said, "to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord," he was using technical jubilee language. The acceptable year wasn't just any year. It was the jubilee year, the year of release and restoration that came every 50 years. Jesus was announcing that he was inaugurating the ultimate jubilee, not just a temporary economic reset that happened every half-century, but the final, eternal liberation from sin, death, and Satan's kingdom. And the reaction in that synagogue tells you everything you need to know about how shocking this claim was. Luke 4:28-29 tells us, "So all those in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and rose up and thrust him out of the city. And they led him to the brow of the hill on which their city was built, that they might throw him down over the cliff." They tried to kill him on the spot, because they understood exactly what he was claiming. But here's what makes this even more incredible. According to the research of biblical chronologists like Josh Peck, when you work backward from established historical dates and apply the Essene calendar system, Jesus began his ministry in what would have been a jubilee year, according to their calculations. The timing was perfect, prophetically perfect. The same scrolls that predicted the Messiah would come during a jubilee to proclaim liberty and freedom were hidden away just decades after Jesus did exactly that. The Essenes who calculated his coming were scattered when Rome destroyed their community. But their calculations, their prophetic timeline, it was preserved in caves, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Shadows, the shepherd will lead his flock to safety. But those who reject him, they'll enter the valley alone. However, September 23rd might not be the date you think it is. 88 reasons Jesus is coming back in 1988. October 21st, 2011 is the end of the world. December 21st, 2012 is the end of the world. Do those sound familiar? They should. These were actual predictions that people believed. Families sold their homes. People quit their jobs. Millions braced themselves for the end. And then, nothing happened. Could a new deception be setting people up to fall even harder this time? Yet here we are again. Some are pointing to September 2025 as the month Jesus will return, and it's gaining momentum. But September 23rd might not be the day you think. Prophecy doesn't give exact dates. The first reason is simple and huge. The Bible never gives a day or hour for the rapture. That means no calculation from feast days can guarantee the year. No political event can lock down the month. No astronomical sign can circle the day. Yes, we are told to watch for seasons. Yes, there are clues for the tribulation timeline. But the rapture itself, we're told to live as if it could happen any moment. In 1988, a book called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988 sold 4.5 million copies. The date came and passed. Many walked away from faith because of it. If September 2025 comes and goes, will our faith go with it? Or will it trigger the great falling away that Scripture warned us was coming? Could focusing on a single month cause us to miss what God is doing right now? If we set a date and it fails, some will mock prophecy altogether. Since Jesus left, people have wanted to know exactly when he will return. Even the disciples asked him, "Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel?" Acts 1:6. But Jesus answered, "It is not for you to know the times or the seasons." Acts 1:7.